Some content or topics discussed could trigger a past anxiety or be sensitive or disturbing to listen to or view. Please view and listen with caution. Hi, my name is Todd Bly-Levin. I'm one of the hosts of the Walking Tall podcast, and it's our mission to help all people that are down and depressed or dealing with some sort of trauma or mental health issue to learn how to stand back up and walk tall again in their lives. Please follow us on all of our social platforms, our YouTube channel, and check out our Walking Tall movement at www.walkingtallmovement.com. Now, here's our show.
Welcome back once again to Walking Tall. And if you were with us last week, we spent time with the most amazing Natalie Douglas, hearing her story of perseverance, suffering from ovarian cancer, a near-death experience, an adoption struggle, and now, unfortunately, a re-diagnosis of that ovarian cancer has come back into her life. But I'm so excited she's in our life, no matter what her struggles are, and she's so strong in her own ways and certainly walking tall. But Dr. LaRosa, you certainly got to know Natalie and hearing her story, both online and offline, and getting to help her a little bit in her career path and getting to know her. What did hearing her story do for you, and how are you feeling after last week's show?
Well, I know what it takes to do the job that she does. I've done it for years. You know, I didn't start out in a leadership position. I worked with kids my whole entire life, and some of the most difficult behaviors and learning styles that you could possibly imagine. So I know her life, and I know how much dedication and hard work it takes to do what she does. And the fact that she's dedicated her life and persisted to the children, not only that she works with, but to her own child as well, is just a true testament to her amazing character. She's just filled with vibrancy, life, goodness, intelligence, and everything that I just treasure in anyone in this field or anyone in life in general. So if I could mentor her, if I could help her in any way, I'm going to be here, and she can reach out to me whenever she's ready.
Yeah, and I hope she will. And, certainly, she will be reaching out to us in support as she goes through her chemotherapy. And I've had a couple of conversations with her since last week's show, and her strength is just so evident, and her passion for life and her vibrancy, as you said, Dr. LaRosa, and her energy and positivity is just, it's captivating, and it's just exciting to hear, no matter her struggles, how positive, the positive outlook she has on life. Like yourself, Todd, you've been through some things, as have I, as have we all, but you remain positive, and you remain that beacon of shining light and hope. And so what about her story resonated with you, both from her tragedy, but also to now, as I call it, her triumph?
Yeah, truly just an amazing individual, number one. Her perseverance, her will to live and survive, and her patience. When you listen to her, if you haven't watched that episode or listened to it, when you watch it, you see this just amazing human being that's just filled with love, and her whole just being it chokes me up, because we need more people like her in our world, that truly care about others. And so it was really cool to meet her, number one, but then also to the connection that Dr. LaRosa and her have. And then Dr. LaRosa's, her wanting to help Natalie, further her career, and how that's affected me personally is Natalie reached out to my daughter, which Dr. LaRosa's already done. And here I've got my daughter that's an aspiring psychologist. She wants to jump into Dr. LaRosa and Natalie's field. So here you have a protege that wants to follow in your footsteps. So Dr. LaRosa is passing down her help to Natalie. Natalie and Dr. LaRosa are passing down their help to Gracie. And it's just this whole circle of life. So I thought it was such a cool show, really cool people, and just so blessed to be around them.
Yeah, it's so true. And as I've kind of called Walking Tall at various occasions, the world's largest peer support group, right? And now it's certainly ambitious, and it's kind of corny or cheesy in a way, but I really think that, we are creating something in the form of a peer support group nationally, globally, whatever, And that's a great example, from Dr. LaRosa to Natalie to now Gracie to who knows. And I could give other examples of how we're creating that peer support group. But one thing was evident to me as I was thinking about this group we were creating. We still are missing various components and various experiences and various traumas in our movement, if you will. And one of the things that we haven't had up until today is physical disability. We heard from Amir Fakari about his brain aneurysm. We heard from Chris Brown about his mental health hurdles of PTSD from a combat, but we haven't had anybody yet that's experienced pure physical disability and what that can do to someone mentally. So we are just so excited today to be able to welcome Miss Laurie Zappulla. And if you don't know, Laurie was like any other teenager in 1979. She graduated high school and was aspiring on to college and to do great things in her life. One day she was swimming with her friends during the summer and unfortunately dove into a pool and hit her head and sadly suffered a spinal cord injury, ultimately giving her a diagnosis of being quadriplegic. After being told she would never walk again, Laurie persevered through many mental health struggles while fighting physically each step of the way. Today, Laurie is an inspiration to us all. She's able to walk with a cane. She also serves as an advocate for all people with mental health or physical disabilities or struggles. And she recently has done a Tedx Talk encouraging others not to diss her, but to see her ability. She's written a memoir titled You're Going to Walk, which can be found globally. And now she's able to speak as a keynote speaker to your organization, spreading the message that diversity without disability is not diverse enough. We're so fortunate to have Miss Laurie Zappulla as a part of the Walking Tall movement. And Todd, please welcome her into the room.
All right, here we go.
The bell, the bell, the bell. Ding dong. And there she is. All right, Laurie, I am just so honored to have you as our guest today on the Walking Tall movement. You will not yet have had the fortunate opportunity to hear our introduction of you, so you'll have to wait till this show airs. But I did kind of inform listeners a little bit about who you are and your struggles and your path in life. And it started, as a teenager, and you suffered an injury. But please, we'd love to get to know who you are. So introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your story.
Hi, my name is Laurie Zappulla, and my story is that I suffered. I was 18. I jumped into a swimming pool and I hit my head and became instantly paralyzed. And it was a miracle I survived the pool and then everything else. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I was born and raised in an Italian family. And it was great. Back then it was the 70s, and went to parochial school and then went to high school, and I had one more week of summer left before college started. And unfortunately, that's when the accident happened. But I forget you wanted me to speak about my...
Well, sure. Yeah. And, hearing of your injury, Laurie, obviously there was many, many, many struggles, both physically and mentally, that you encountered after, receiving your diagnosis and understanding what you were encountering. So if you don't mind, talk to us a little bit about, not only the physical struggles and what your rehabilitation and that process was like, but also the mental health hurdles that challenge provided you as well.
Well, so becoming instantly paralyzed is huge. And actually, I never lost consciousness. So it's just, there's a little strange things about things that led up to it. 2 days before, my cousin and I went to see the movie called The Other Side of the Mountain. And in that movie, I believe Beau Bridges, I think it was one of his first movies, in that story, which is based off a true story, she was an Olympic hopeful, and she broke her neck in a trial run. And it was the summer. It was hot outside. The only reason we went to the movies was because it was hot outside. And this is the movie I see 2 days before I break my own neck. And so in the pool that day, I never lost consciousness, and somehow I got flashes of that movie in my head.
Oh.
And I don't know, for something that, like my cousin had said, she didn't realize what was happening, and she was looking at me. And so this is happening in nanoseconds, right? You can't count this. But for me, it was like time just stopped. And I saw this movie, and I realized, because I was like in a fetal position, and I had to get up above the water, and I knew I was paralyzed. And then everything kind of went dark, and then I saw light, and I heard my name. I heard my first and last name. And I just, God, I say that it's God. And he said, if you don't come up, you won't come back. And it's kind of a weird thing, but the next thing I knew, I was up above the water saying help. And my cousin then realized, and she said help. And then there was an off-duty police officer. He was home that day. He wasn't supposed to be home that day. And he heard help, and he ran and jumped, and he took a lounge chair and floated me on it until the ambulance came. And there were so many things, I call them God show-ups, because they were just overwhelmingly like appointed at that point. Our cousin was a doctor, and she was having coffee with like the best neurosurgeon on Staten Island when the call came in. And it was kind of like, what are the chances of 2 doctors being, there at the hospital, and they knew each other, and it was the last summer holiday, and he was there when I was brought into the ER. And I mean, the story just goes on to, the shock of hearing you're never going to walk again. And then what happened was my uncle's neighbor was a Christian and went to her church and prayed with them. And then this man showed up with a collar, and I thought he was a Catholic priest. And he said, no. He said, but God told me to pray with you. And he prayed with me. And then the next thing, I felt heat and like an electric shock. And then the next day, my toes moved. So going through all of that, I still needed the surgery. They took a piece of my hip and they put it in the back where the fracture was. And then they fused me, and then I was in a halo for 10 weeks. And then I got moved. So all that time in St. Vincent's, it was an aging hospital. There weren't many spinal cord injuries at the time. And I started to get return. My body started to come back. So thankfully there was a patient advocate, and she got me into NYU at Rusk Institute. And it was a so different experience there. They're focused on rehab. They're focused on independent living and then psychological care as well. And so I went from, you're never going to walk. And then the first day, my therapist did a few things, and she said, you're going to walk. And it was like, from there on, everything just changed. And then
Yeah.
I walked 100 days later in the parallel bars.
Amazing. I have the tingles, the goosebumps. Todd's clapping. Dr. LaRosa is breathing. Like, your story, Laurie, is so amazing, as I've told you many times. And I just can't imagine, not only the physical struggles that you encountered and endured throughout your rehabilitation, but you talked about the psychological, and offline, you and I have spoke, quite candidly about, my struggles mentally, but also yours during that experience. So if you don't mind, please tell us a little bit, not about the physical, but the mental hurdles you were overcoming throughout that process as well.
Well, the physical challenge was evident. You could see all of it and try to, figure it out at that point, how to walk again. But I was also inpatient for almost a year, and then I was outpatient for almost another year. So everything about that, I was still traumatized. I was 18, and I couldn't imagine, what am I going to do for the rest of my life like this? And everything was a challenge. Everything was different. My body wasn't responding the way I wanted it to. It looked different. I just, I had like no hair. I had patches of hair. I had hair on my face. My body was inflated because of all the medications. And then if I walked again, but I wasn't walking the way I did before. Nothing was like it was before. So the challenges were trying to get used to this body, trying to envision what are you going to do for the rest of your life, and just coping with the fact that all that uncertainty, and then all the pain that I did go through, and guilt and shame. Back then, being disabled was, you're really disabled, and it's good to see now there's a shift towards people, I think, understanding better and being proud of themselves. But back in 1979, 1980, there wasn't much there for that. I did have counseling. So I did have a psychologist, and then I had a vocational counselor, and I got closer with my vocational counselor because I was motivated, and I wanted to do something. So her and I did become more friendly, and she got me through. She got me into community college just to get used to being with people again. That's a whole nother thing. I was isolated for so long. Like there in the hospital, I was the big fish, I was the star. I did well. Because they say that less than 1% of people with the injury I had will ever walk again. So I did have a roommate that walked also. So there we were big, but now we were leaving and going into the world. And, I remember them saying, oh, now you're going to be in the big ponds, you're going to be the small fish. And I was like, yeah, more like a feeder fish, it was just really hard. And those were readjusting to being around people that weren't disabled, being around my peers. And then physically, there's a lot of barriers.
Sure. Well, it's
so-
just, you said a few things there that really hit home to me. You said you were a star, and I want to let you know you still are a star. And as far as we're concerned, hearing your story is just as amazing, miraculous, whatever you want to call it. It's inspiring. But the second thing I said, and Todd, I want to turn it to you. You said God show ups, and I thought to myself, man, I had a God show up on July 7th, 2022. And that's when Todd texted me out of the blue to be a resource. And I know, Todd, you being a man of faith, what is hearing Laurie's story done for you in certain ways as we kind of transition?
Well, I think, Laurie, number one, your strength is remarkable. And I truly believe too that you had a lot of angels in your path and wrapping their wings around you on that horrible day of your tragedy. But that you have a purpose, and your purpose, a lot of times, and when we've suffered tragedy, God creates a story and an opportunity to help others, right? And your story of survival, like we've talked about, is now becoming somebody else's survival guide. And it may not be related to a spinal cord injury, but it might be something else, that maybe their faith. I know on my particular situation, after we got home from my shooting, I had a dream, and I know I was not alone that night. I'm 6'5", 200 plus pounds, and I'm running into a field full of gunfire and getting shot at. And I feel that angels protected me in my way. And I was meant to do that. And I'm meant to carry that weight on my shoulders because God is right next to me. And to be able to help tell my story and listen to yours, it's truly amazing. And I think just the fact that you were so open to want to live and to want to walk and not be the feeder fish. And I'm excited, not in a entertainment way, but your story is just so, like, I'm just sitting on the edge of my seat saying, okay, what's the next step? Like, how did she do in community college? And what did you do after that? So
We'll get to that.
Awesome.
Let's not let the cat out of the bag too soon, Todd. We'll hear about the amazing
let's
thing
go.
Laurie's doing because of it. But Dr. LaRosa, as we've met amazing guests, no different than Laurie over time, we're starting to learn that there's commonalities amongst trauma, whether it's physical or experiential, like Todd and mine. We heard from Amir Fakhari, who had a brain aneurysm, and very similar circumstances to yourself, Laurie. The isolation, the fear of integrating back into society. I can imagine some folks are even experiencing that, having gone through the pandemic of late. So, Dr. LaRosa, please, if you don't mind, I could only imagine how what you have to say hearing Laurie's story. So I'm excited to hear that right now. So please.
Well, once again, I have so much to say, but I'm going to try to keep it relevant and sort of concise because I do want to hear the rest of Laurie's story. One thing that you touched upon that is so important is vulnerability that patients feel. When a person is sick or hurt or in any way hospitalized, there's a sense of vulnerability and fear that comes with that naturally. It's difficult to be someone who's hurting, who relies on other people to get better, to feel stronger, and to resume their lives. And so just going through that alone at the age that you were when you were just graduating high school is a scary, scary place to be. How you persevered through and spent 10 weeks in the halo, you must have been absolutely terrified. But when you're working on your physical strength and you're working on your physical skills, it's secondary almost to others around you to worry about the mental effects and the after effects that such a circumstance could have on a person. And once again, just like our guest Amir, being so young and going through something so traumatic has an absolute lasting effect on a person's ability to conceptualize and move forward. And as we talked about on the show too as well so many times, the ability and the need sometimes for people to take a step back and have to reframe their entire existence and just start all over again, walk tall and put one foot in front of the other is an extraordinarily difficult thing to do. And you've done that, and you've shared with the world so much valuable information. In terms of what's next, I say I'd love to see a movie about your story because it's inspirational and you're inspirational. Once again, you exude goodness. I I can relate to you. You know, I'm also from an Italian family from New York.
New Yorkers.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the family members you know, that I always had growing up were very much involved in every aspect of my life, and what I needed, would surround me with all kinds of supports, you know, whenever I need it. And I'm curious to hear about the role of your family in your healing process.
Well, thank you for kind words that you all said. Yeah, unfortunately, my father died 3 years before this, and my mom. So my father died, and I was getting ready to go to college. You know, I went through high school and everything. And then my mom, who was grieving, and then she started to come out of that, and she planned this big European trip so she could, like, kind of, you know, change her life and get into new direction kind of thing. And she goes away and she says to me, I'm booked, I'm all booked, and here's the travel agent's card. And even if you get hurt, don't call Uncle Joe. He'll help you out. And unfortunately, I was at his house that day, and that's when it happened. So my mom had to come back from her trip, and he couldn't tell her on the phone what happened. So she came back, and it was horrible. It was just, my mom was a mess, but she became very strong. And I had my other family around me, and definitely was a huge help, especially readjusting back to home. But yeah, family is everything, and you know, having people support, it's just, without that, the loneliness becomes even larger.
Sure.
So
Yeah, and I have to think, you know, if not for your support system, whether it be your family, your husband, your whomever, your children for that matter, like, you wouldn't be able to, and maybe you would, but it wouldn't be as easy to be the person you are now. And we're about to hear a little bit about the amazing work you're doing because of your story and your past and all the things that I believe certainly the world should hear about. You know, you've done a TED Talk, you've written a book, you're creating curriculum now for schools, you're aspiring to be a keynote speaker, and all these things that I know you'll accomplish. So yeah, please, like, let's flip the script. Let's talk a little bit about the amazing work you're doing now because of your experience and all of that trauma, and how, like I said, you're turning that into triumph.
well, so all these years, I would tell my story, and people would say, "Oh, you should write a book, or it should be a movie." And then one
We just
day,
heard it.
yeah, I just did. I don't know. I just wrote the book, and from there I started to speak, and I entered a TED Talk, and it was a 3-minute program. You had to come prepared with a 3-minute pitch, TED Talk pitch. And it was a live event, and I was lucky. They called me, and so I wanted to tell the message about, don't diss me, see my ability. And I wore a shirt that I made, and I crossed out the diss, and what's left is abled. And that was my message, and people wanted the shirt, and I met someone, and she said, you should make shirts like that. And I want one, and I'll help you go to the library and make them, which for me was new. I hadn't been in a library, especially one that had 3D machines and printing machines and all these things. And for me, as a quad, my hands don't function normally. So it was very challenging. And, to do the program, I don't know if it's vinyl cutting, you have to weed it out, and then you have to place, and then you have to hot press it. And I did it independently. So as I was doing this, I became this person. I was trying to, suggest and inspire people to be as more able. And, in the word disability is ability. And my focus always as a kid was, what am I able to do now? And I'm blessed as a quadriplegic. I do ambulate. I do walk. I walk with a cane. I use a walker sometimes. I use an electric scooter. But my whole concept was I still can do things. I have to. And so from there with the t-shirts, I then started doing some public speaking, and that's still, I did have something to do with this high school in New York, but unfortunately COVID stopped that process. And so that was that whole, it was exciting. I spoke at FIT. I was invited there because I met someone on LinkedIn. I met their chief diversity officer, and I challenged him and said, I don't see disability in your diversity. And he invited me to speak there to their diversity group or council, I forget what they call them. And so that was another start of just sharing about disability, the lack of awareness that it has, the lack of inclusion. So I started speaking about that, and I think that's how we met. Well, we met because you posted something about shame, and I love the name of your foundation. Because for so long I was ashamed to tell my story, especially the part about a near-death experience, and and then also mentioning faith in God. It's not popular, but people look at you like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
But I started to realize, and then I started to meet people that did have similar stories. And I did meet someone a few years ago whose husband was having a heart attack, and he heard, you must come back. And that gave me the chills. But it was just, this is my story. This is what happened to me. And I don't know, my perseverance, I think it definitely is faith-based and support-based. I was fortunate to meet my husband, and that was a big transition as well. Like, how do you be this disabled person and then try to date, or you never think.
Because you're abled to do
Yes.
that.
That's right. And talk to us a little bit about your family. You mentioned your husband, but you mentioned to me you have children, and talk about that experience as well, right? Like, I know we're hearing about all the amazing things you're doing. We all have so many questions now, Laurie, and we want to focus on your TED Talk and your book. I want to hear more about that. But if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your family life with your husband and whatnot.
So we met in New York, and I was still in college, and then I started to not want to be in Manhattan anymore. Started to get a little paranoid, and I said to him, I need to focus again on my body, and I want to move to Florida. And he was like, I don't know if I want to move to Florida. So eventually he did change his mind. We got married, we moved to Florida, and I became now a wife, and now and then 2 years later, which they said I shouldn't have children, but I did, I became a mom. And then that was a whole nother set of challenges as disabled. I did drop him. I mean, I couldn't carry him. I had to put him in a little stroller around the house until he was able to walk. But back then I was physically more fit. And I mean, there's days when I have a picture of me riding a regular bicycle. And sorry, my computer just did something
You're
weird.
okay. You're still with us.
And there's picture of me riding a bicycle in a park, and I'm like, wow, if this was current and I would have posted that, I would have got like a million hits, But back then it was nothing. It was like, oh, okay, you're riding a bicycle now.
Yeah.
No, people used to say to me, well, you don't look disabled to me, or you don't act disabled. And it never bothered me. Now you're not allowed to say that to people.
Yeah.
But
I want to hear more about your book. But Dr. LaRosa, please, I know you're chomping at the bit. I see you over there. So please chime in.
Yeah. I just wanted to just add some context, all around, in that the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities here on Long Island does a lot of really great work about talking about people as having differing abilities. Like, there are no disabilities, there's just different levels of ability, and everyone has strengths, and sometimes they're just not evident to others. And they put together, with the help of the state, and some other entities, a video series of some of the people that used to be in the Willowbrook system. I don't know if you've heard of the Willowbrook system here in New York, but it was a huge state institution back in the 70s. Geraldo Rivera exposed it for extraordinary abuse, neglect, terrible treatment conditions. He snuck in undercover and exposed the whole entire thing. And they did like a documentary series, and they talked to some of the residents who live there. And I really want to find this video, and I really want to share it. There's plenty of people that stick out in my mind, and you'll see why if you see this, and you must see it, and I will share the link to it. But there's a couple of gentlemen. One of them was born with cerebral palsy, and on the outside, he looked disabled, and he looked also intellectually disabled. He didn't have control over his body. He didn't have control over his words. It took him a while to speak, and he had a lot of uncontrollable bodily movements, as go along with cerebral palsy. So when judged from the outside, people mistook him for a person who basically might have had a very low IQ, and maybe, in the profoundest severe range of intellectual disability and so forth. It turns out this man had an extremely healthy IQ, maybe higher than all of us put together, who knows. But he when he spoke and people actually listened to him and gave him the time to speak, you were just in awe, in complete amazement with everything that this person had inside. I've seen stories, I've known people with autism that on the exterior, when they're shut down, they don't speak, they don't look, they engage in self-stimulatory behavior, but you have those lucid moments and those connections that let you know that you're reaching them very deep inside. And I've seen it, and I've gone through it my whole career, in the field, that I am in. So I cannot thank you enough for focusing on don't diss me, look at my ability. Goodness, that is such an important message for so many people. Yeah. And the fact that you created that, you brought that to light, you've done so much for this world, and for people that need to be seen for what they can do, not what they can't do.
Sure.
Mhm.
And Dr. LaRosa, you mentioned being in awe of some folks on that documentary you just kind of spoke to. And I could speak for myself. I'm in awe of you, Laurie, and your story. But Todd, I can only imagine you are as well. And I just see you kind of smiling and sitting back, and just in excitement, but also like in support, and also in strength with Laurie. So how are you feeling right now hearing about all this? And then Laurie, I want to hear about your book. Let's talk about your book here after this.
Yeah, I think, when you look at, Laura, you've mentioned a couple of times like the time references, right? And going back into the 70s and 80s and how people perceived people with disabilities, and your story, Dr. LaRosa, on the perception if somebody has some sort of ailment or something that's abnormal to society, that we automatically associate that with a low IQ or something else. And I think the one thing, in having teenagers for kids now and watching them grow up, the social media has really exposed really the not just the disability, but the person that's inside, right? And I think there's more, you mentioned it early on in the show, that there's more of an acceptance and more of an understanding. It's not, when you walk into a restaurant back when we were younger and you maybe saw somebody in a wheelchair, you were like, oh my gosh, that person's in a wheelchair. Now you see wheelchairs all the time. You see people in wheelchairs all the time. Social media, there's all kinds of it. So it's not as uncommon, which is great for our society, because now you've got, I know in my own kids' years and as they're growing up, it's socially acceptable in school for a child with a disability to attend a class with other kids. And it's just a different world that we're living in, which is a great thing for our society. I think there's just more love, more acceptance in that generation. So I'm excited to see kind of what they do as they grow up and become adults in our society. But it also saddens me too that, you went through what you went through, but you're this beacon light, that you're sharing your story to help others that may be struggling in today's times with the support that they have, knowing, hey, I'm going to be okay. Look at this lady. Like, she's done all these cool things. She's a mom. She got married. She's moved. She rode a bike. Like, let's good. Let's go. That's my inspiration. So, but the other thing that I just wanted to touch on is, you mentioned the loneliness part of it, in going through that mental struggle. And I think that, that's the common factor that we notice, whether it's we're talking to, Officer Brian Wood, retired Officer Brian Wood, and the silence that he felt sometimes going through a call and trying to deal with things emotionally. Retired Marine, combat wounded Christopher Brown, and his silence after being injured, my silence, Chris's silence. I think that just any type of trauma, when there's that silence and that loneliness, there's the fear. That's the scared moment that, God, we don't ever want to be a part of. So having faith, knowing that you're not alone, sharing stories of community, and that's just strength amongst us all, right? So I appreciate you talking about that too.
Yeah, and speaking of sharing stories and having strength, I've mentioned, you did write a book, You're Going to Walk, and I saw the other day somebody, I think it was in Belgium, if I'm not mistaken, was waving it around a little bit. So Laurie, talk to us a little bit about your book. What can a reader expect in reading it? Where can they find it? Let's talk about your book for a second.
Okay. So I have it here. Hold it up. I'm going to walk. So I wrote this in 2018, and like I said, someone had asked me, she knew me through family, but she never wanted to ask. And then she did, and she said, please tell me. I just want to know. So I said, do you want the short or long version? And she said long. And I guess it just kind of sparked a lot. I went home and I wrote the first 4 chapters. And then the next thing I know, there's a book writers group starting in my community. And it was great because they just kept me focused. They kept me, they critiqued me. And so it became not only just, you know, I was 18, I broke my neck. I wanted to write a good book, you know, I wanted to keep the person interested. And a lot of people say that, they say, oh, I couldn't put it down and it should be a movie and all of that. And so that to me is great too, because there's a lot of short stories, and I had to go back and remember 38 years. And then some things I just never forgot. I mean, there are places, conversations, times that I could go right back to even today.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the book, I start off with the tragedy of it, and then I go into stories. There's a lot of fun stories in here, and a lot of those are how I was adjusting back into, you know, society and all of that. And but it became I started posting more about it. And there was a girl in Germany, she was attending KU Leuven in Belgium University, and she was doing her thesis, and she read my book and she wrote her thesis about it, and her professor liked it so much he put the book in the library there.
Amazing.
So
And
that was amazing.
It's so amazing. Isn't it just amazing? I think, you know, all four of us can agree on the therapeutic value of the arts, right? Writing a book, singing song, hosting a podcast, whatever the case may be, right? There's therapy benefits into production, into having a goal, into writing a book, or whatever, playing the guitar. Todd, you have one right behind you. Please don't play for us. But Dr. LaRosa, if you don't mind, speak real quick, like on the value of the arts in mental health, or what writing a book could have done for somebody like Laurie.
Well, it's cathartic in a lot of ways. And, you know, what came to my mind was when you told the story to your family member, and how that you just said that something really clicked when you went back and you gave her the long version of that story. Now, I don't know if that's the first time that you've ever really gone back, you know, to square one and told the whole story, but it seemed to be a turning point for you in the sense that you knew there was a story to tell, and maybe telling it helped you at that time more than you realized, and then obviously opened up your creative floodgates and led to you being able to write this book. And even, you know, the inspiration that you felt from the book writers club that you went through, all of it is therapeutic. You know, there's different parts of our brains that are ignited when we get into the arts, advanced things like artistry and music. And, you know, we talk about that good old frontal lobe of ours with, you know, metacognition. You know, you don't know necessarily all the time what it is that you're experiencing, but when you know what you know, and then you know what you don't know, it sort of triggers you on a different level to seek more and to delve more deeply into the things that are giving us that therapeutic value. So we all have them, and you know, that's why it's important. We all talk about taking time for ourselves and self-care. You know, it's something I'm honestly, I neglect very, very desperately, but you know, we all have these creative outlets. For me, it's interior decorating. I love decorating. I love designing. I'm not formally trained, but I you know, I take it out on my house or wherever I'm living, and I get to live my creative freedom through that. My husband's a classical guitarist, and you know, in his life, whenever he has dealt with anything emotionally, he has told me that the guitar can just calm him right down, and you know, puts him in a really zen place. You know, it provides a lot of value to so many people, and we all have creative tendencies. We just have to explore them. So it's,
yeah. And speaking, you know, of creative, and Todd, you know, I think part of being creative has been telling your story, Laurie, or telling your story, Todd, or even you, Dr. LaRosa, and myself. And Todd, you've had some experiences after Route, you know, of telling your story in a creative manner, having been featured on MLB TV and things like that. You know, talk about your creative process after your experience, no different than Laurie. How have you helped heal yourself through maybe some arts, books, music, whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I think, definitely. I mean, that's why I took up guitar. I've always wanted to play, and, listening to classical music always kind of soothes me through my, daily struggle with PTSD and whatnot. But telling the story to me has become therapeutic in a way, of where my boots took me that night, my, pre and post shooting, unfortunate, experience. But the therapy part to me is really comes from the goodness, right? That's come after, and the people that have stood up and that are walking tall, and just that motivates and drives me. So I think telling a story, of one's adversities, being completely vulnerable and transparent in today's society, where the stigma is, especially, with like, we're supposed to be tough and we're not supposed to share our feelings and things, but it's okay. At what point was it not cool to like say, hey, you know what? I'm not having a good day today. I'm really struggling. Maybe, I had something going on at home. So I think stories can really inspire and uplift, those that we never really maybe even knew that they were struggling in their life. But to read a good book or hear a good story and go on and have hopefully a great day or a good weekend, I mean, it's just powerful. So it's
Yeah.
cool.
Speaking of reading a good book, I can't wait to read You're Going to Walk. And,
Where do we get it?
Yeah, exactly. Where can we find it real quick, Laurie? Is it on Amazon or where can, a listener or ourselves find it?
It's on Amazon.
Okay.
My LinkedIn profile is in the contact. There's the link
Okay.
there.
We'll share it on this
We'll
show
share it.
too.
Yeah. And
so at
and
the
as
end of
we-
this, you'll see a link, that links right to that page.
Great.
So,
And, Laurie, we've talked a little bit about LinkedIn and social media, and which, that's how we've connected. And, it is as peculiar as it sounds, walking tall in your circumstance, mixing, couldn't be more, I think, fate in a way, if you will. And so you mentioned, I've made a silly little post about, being vulnerable in some case, and it resonated with you, and that's how we've connected. So if you don't mind, please talk a little bit about the Walking Tall movement, and, what about it resonates with you, and, how you see us working together.
Yes. So I saw your post about shame. And you asked the question, what made you feel shame, or what makes you feel shame, or anything in your past? And then your name, Walking Tall, I just thought, I'm relating to that, it's definitely there. The shame part was, having people stare at you, was difficult, because that they're staring, but that's a hard adjustment for a lot of people with a physical difference, and it really can get unnerving at times. And then I guess, writing the book to talk about cathartic, people would say that to me, it's going to be great. It's going to be so cathartic, and it really was. It just came to the point where I started to realize, yes, my story has value. I'm not ashamed anymore. Because I would normally be very shy. I would never get on a stage and speak and do anything that I've been doing. So I answered your question about shame, and then I just kept following you. I think your stories about your trauma is amazing. I think that being vulnerable and then sharing and all of that is really key, because back when I was younger, like, you had to be really sick to go to a psychologist or something like that, like it was just not part of our culture at all. And now, and I'm still friends with my psychologist. I still speak to her after 40 something years.
Amazing.
And we reconnected, and it's just a lot of that was important at the time. Got me through just speaking about it and sharing about it with her. But then if you can now write the book and share with everyone else, that's another type of therapy that it's hard to explain. But I just, your walking tall for me is important because of the physical, but I understand the message. That's what I try to convey to people is, you're still able to do many things, and you have to find it and then make that a new passion in your life.
Well, I got news for you, Laurie. People are still staring at you, but they're staring at you in a different light, and they're staring at you, as Dr. LaRosa said, in awe and in just passion for your strength and your vulnerability. So I don't think people are ever going to stop staring at you at this point, but it's just in a different light. And I know I'm staring at you in that manner as well. So as we kind of wrap today's show up, Dr. LaRosa, have at it.
I'm sorry, I just want to interrupt and say one more thing. Laurie, you're bringing light to something that's so important in our society that we really need to do a better job of, and that is empathy enhancement. The way that you described how you felt when people were staring at you is important, because those starers, those people that judge, those people that put others down for going through weak or tough times and always have a judgment to give, need more training and understanding of how those behaviors make other people feel. And they need to start caring a little bit more about how they're making other people feel. So, our mission of Walking Tall, is based upon people that have a great deal of empathy and kindness, compassion, and, work hard to lift others up. Not everybody in society fits into that category, and we hope to inspire people to do better in this regard. In one of our early shows, I talked about how in the 90s, when I was working with people in residential facilities who had a variety of intellectual disabilities, neurodevelopmental disabilities, they were adults. And I used to take them out into the community to have a good time, to eat dinner, to go bowling, watch movies, whatever else we would do. And, I was about 19 or so, at the time, 20, 21, maybe. And the looks and the stares and the treatment that we received just because these individuals had disabilities was truly horrifying to me. A person who loved them and saw every ability that they had and knew the value of their lives as, being truly good people that made this world a whole heck of a lot better. It hurt my soul that people from the outside would look in and judge harshly and negatively anybody for what they look like. So it's always been a sore spot for me. It's always been, something that I try to advocate, for, and just helping others develop that empathetic side of themselves. Just try to put yourself in that position. And, the important part of what we do here is allowing ourselves to be vulnerable for everyone who comes on here to tell their stories, to talk about when they were down and out in life in a variety of ways, and hopefully what others did for them to walk tall again and what they can do for others. It's truly the point. And so thank you for being vulnerable and transparent and sharing your feelings and your experience with us, and to everyone who's listening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Todd, I know you're staring right back at Laurie with love. And how are you feeling as we kind of wrap up today's show?
Yeah, I think, Dr. LaRosa stole all my words again.
Always does.
Sorry.
But yeah, no, just again, thank you for everything you're doing. Keep the fight, walking forward, and I have that mentality that, like Dr. LaRosa said, I don't appreciate people that judge others, by their cover. And we all have our own fight and our own challenges that we deal with daily. And so do those people. And so if we can spread a little bit more love and share some more empathy and be more vulnerable, maybe they can change too. So that's the mission, right? Walking tall. But thank you for being on. This was amazing.
Yeah, and Laurie, I'll give a little bit of insight. As we were introducing you, I had mentioned, us here in Walking Tall. We have aspired to reach out to all walks of life, frankly, people with all sorts of abilities or inabilities or experiences of trauma, what have you. And one thing we never had was somebody, with lesser abilities like yourself. And so I'm so honored that. And when I say abilities, I mean physical, of course. And, I'm just so honored that you've chosen to come on today. I know as we planned this, you were expressing to me how nervous you were, but I want to let you know you killed it. You were amazing. And today's show was so inspirational. So I couldn't thank you enough for coming on and being a part of our movement. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And before we sign off, there's always two little words we ask our guest of honor to lead us in. So Laurie, if you don't mind, I think you know what those two are, and the floor is yours.
Walk tall.
Walk tall, everybody. Have a great rest of your week, and walk tall.
Walk tall, everybody.
Thank you.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, The Balance Project. Check them out at www.thebalance-project.org. Thank you so much for being a proud supporter of the Walking Tall movement.